If you have repetitive strain injury or a little bit of arthritis or just plain weak hands, you know how difficult it can be when you're making dinner and you're trying to chop things, especially if you're using a knife like this, where it's just flat, and so you have to sort of contort your hands to use it. So here to talk about some really wonderful ergonomic kitchen tools, including knives and a pair of scissors, is Kevin Dwyer. So Kevin, welcome. What do you want to tell us about your hands or, these tools that you've discovered?
Well, you and I have talked about it, but in my later years that I'm fast approaching here, I do find that I have problems with my hands somewhat. I do have the snap fingers. I have a piece of hardened cartilage in my hand. The repetitiveness of it can hurt as well. And a friend of mine turned me on to these fantastic knives and scissors that make it so much easier to do the prep work for all your cooking. And I love to cook, so this has been a lifesaver for me in obtaining these. It's the simple design of the knives, I think, that really kind of work. These are very easy to just simply slice down with your arm, rather, as opposed to just always just using your hand. So I feel like I've got a much better grip.
The tool is curved rather than your wrist.
Exactly. This is the knife, the chef knife that I've been using, for years. And but the one thing with these type of chef knives is that I have to hold it like this, and you can see my hand, my fingers wrapped around it. That it's more difficult to hold on to this, to grab it, and to really hold on to it. But with this knife, you're holding onto it in a much different way. And you've got your fingers right on the ridge of it. So you're using your whole hand as opposed to just your fingers.
So you're using your whole arm.
You're using your whole arm.
In essence, yeah, and the power of your arm.
The power of your arm, exactly. So it makes it a lot easier. And of course, the knives themselves come in a variety of sizes. They come in this one here. Again, I've got them all with the cases on them because that's how you want to store them. But the 9-inch, which certainly helps you a lot, especially if you're working with poultry and cutting up a chicken or anything of that nature, or even kind of chopping into a butternut squash. Size down they have is a 7-inch, which again certainly helps with a lot of the chopping on the prep work when you're setting up for soups and casseroles and things of that nature. And then you have the 5-inch, which I was just using, and that certainly helps with a lot of the cleaning of the vegetables and cutting off the ends. And then my Perry knife, the small one, which is a 3-inch one, which honestly gets used probably about 10 times a day for various activities around the kitchen. So all these different sizes certainly help. What I also like a lot is the scissors that this company Fiskars again has put together, because again you're able to just instead of fitting your fingers in and trying to cut things, it's all by pressure, and you can simply close it. So if you're cutting different things, I actually always have these with me as I go into the garden to cut flowers or anything of that nature. But I also find it certainly a lot easier to cut herbs.
And you're using your power grip rather than straining your fingers or trying to slip them through the loops on a scissor.
Exactly. I mean, just as I do this, I can feel my fingers, a little bit of a snap. I mean, I've been up all day and I've been exercising to the gym and everything. So my hands are much looser than they can be if you're starting off kind of cold into a cooking project. But it's more difficult to do a scissors as a standard scissors than it is the pressure scissors, which you can pretty much
just those look great.
So would you like to see me how I use these knives?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
Chop away.
It's a much easier slicing if you're using your whole arm as opposed to just, and you've got great control over that as well. I feel that that's the real basic perks of a knife like this is that even though you've got a hold of it nice and firm, because your fingers and your thumb and your finger on either side of it on this ridge rather, and by pushing down on it, you really feel like you've got a good control and your hand's not going to slip by any chance. So push this down a little bit. And so now I'll use the 7-inch. And you can see, because I can use my entire arm, it all slides in very easily. Now a harder vegetable, obviously, again, if you were using a regular knife, something along the chef knife, it becomes a little more difficult because you don't have a good control on your hand. For me, I don't have a good control on this because my fingers are weak. And it's either with an arthritis or the snap fingers or something, but it makes it much difficult to grab and really hold on to this. And again, with this knife and this ridge down near the blade, I feel like I've got a hold of it, like a much stronger control over the whole mechanism of it. So, and you're using your arm. That's a very important thing to be able to make sure you have control when you're working on especially the harder vegetables are actually a little bit more difficult because it's easier for them to slip. Certainly you can do other things by flattening off one side of the vegetable so that it has a solid side. Of course, that will help you quite a bit as well. If you kind of have one side that's flat and it lies flat on the cutting board. But again, I find that I have a better control over the knife because of the 2 ridges out near the blade that I can grab onto, and then using my arm as opposed to just my fingers, it makes it a much easier cutting and prepping.
Those tools look really wonderful, but they also look really, really sharp, which is probably why it's so easy for you to chop carrots.
They hold on to their sharpness. The blades hold on to the sharpness quite a bit. I mean, I do have sharpeners, but I find that these are already so sharp to begin with. I rarely ever have to fine tune them at all. At least I haven't at this point. And I've had these for a couple of years, a year and a half. And what I've learned in my years of working in the hospitality business with some very top-notch chefs, but it's important to keep them, and be safety and keep them on the guards, because especially when they're in the drawers and you're going to fish around and get something out of the drawer, you don't want to come across a sharp knife. So it's important to keep the guards on them when you're storing them. So these are wonderful, and of course they have a guard that goes on top of it, and so you can just slip these right into your pocket or your whatever you wear for the guard. And again, they're very smartly designed. I mean, you just slip that on and you can just close it in about 2 seconds or 1 second. So they're wonderful. They're really wonderful.
Those ergonomic tools can really make a difference. And I think a lot of people love to cook, but they don't want to have their hands hurt while they're doing it.
And I will say one other thing too, because again, they were given to me, so I didn't pay any more than a quarter to make that exchange for knives not being a gift. But I did go online just to see what the company had to say about their tools. And the one thing that kind of surprised me is the cost. They're very reasonably priced. Every one of these knives are very reasonably priced, especially in comparison to some of your more expensive lines, your Japanese knives, etc. But they've been fantastic for my use, and I've enjoyed having them.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing this information, because we need tools that are shaped to the hand rather than vice versa. And, you know, if you've got trigger finger or weak hands for whatever reason, or, you know, anything that can reduce hand strain and help you use your whole body is really, really a gift to people. I think anybody, I think a lot of people who don't have hand injuries would really appreciate these knives.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right on that.